Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. We are back from a few weeks break. We have a great interview for all of you today with Jason Brown. Before we get into any of that, let's go over some updates in the FedEx Ground contractor industry. First, One FedEx. FedEx Ground contracting in Canada came to an end, with FedEx committing to the corporate-owned and operated express division to handle all pickup and delivery business within the country of Canada. In the lower 48 states, however, it seems like FedEx is going the other way. We're increasingly getting reports that express volume is being diverted into ground buildings as they test that out. We're also getting reports that some express buildings in Indiana, for example, this month they've got their notice. They're going to be closing altogether. That's good news for anyone tuning into this podcast who is interested in the FedEx Ground contractor space. All right, second is the Orlando Expo. FedEx brought back its big nationwide expo for FedEx contractors this year. It's officially called the FedEx Forward Service Provider Summer Summit, which is a mouthful. Most people are just calling it the Orlando Expo instead. FedEx is going to host more than 125 exhibitors to rub shoulders with FedEx service providers as they travel into Orlando. Will you be in Orlando? Why or why not? We'd like to know. Drop us a comment in the comment section or send me an email directly to ryan@routingforsuccess.com. We'd like to know what you think. Third is truck supply. As of this month, there are still roughly 6,000 FedEx Ground spec step vans built and available for purchase sitting on dealers' floor plans. That's almost $250 million in chassis alone sitting on dealer floor plans, not including the bodies installed on them. That figure of 6,000 also doesn't include the roughly 1,500 estimated strip chassis, which are sitting at body manufacturers awaiting upfit. Just to put that number into perspective, FedEx Ground contractors as a whole will only purchase 3,000 to 4,000 new step vans over the course of a year. So there's still an 18 to 24 month supply of step vans sitting on the ground ready to go. That's a huge number, and it's contributing to sales prices as truck prices continue to fall. This month, right now, we're seeing Ford F-59 P1000 step vans sell for as little as $60,000 for a brand new F-59 P1000 with air conditioning FedEx Ground spec. That figure was $70,000 as of December of this previous year. Prices will probably begin to increase once the 2021 model year trucks get sold through. I don't know exactly when that will happen. Right now, there are still some pretty great deals to be found on step vans. The fourth and final update is the capacity-based services agreement. FedEx Ground has been testing a capacity-based services agreement in a few select areas. The terms of this agreement look a lot like an Amazon DSP contract in that they do not grant the service provider exclusive rights to a geographic territory. Instead, what they do is define a broad non-exclusive service area and require the service provider to maintain a specific number of trucks, vans, and personnel to be put into service at a day's notice, whenever or wherever FedEx needs. This is being tested in Tennessee and possibly a few other areas too, and has been for a few months now. It's still to be determined whether they're going to roll this out more broadly or if they're just using this on an as-needed basis for particularly distressed areas. If this type of contract were to get rolled out on a very wide basis, it would have significant implications for the equity value in FedEx Ground route businesses. Welcome to Routing for Success, the show where we interview today's top logistics professionals, giving them a platform to share their stories and best practices. Today, we are talking with Jason Brown. Jason Brown got started as an RPS driver prior to becoming a contractor in September of 1998. In this episode, we discuss some lessons he's learned over his 25 years as a contractor, including lessons learned during the UPS strike of the late 90s, the COVID-19 pandemic, and more. I'm pleased to present to you Jason Brown. All right, we're here with Jason Brown. Jason, thank you for being here.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. So we're here to talk about your FedEx Ground contracting business. Before we get into any of that, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the business, but what were you doing before? What's your professional background before you ever got into delivering packages?
Well, I actually started back when it was RPS. I became a contractor September of 1998. I drove for another contractor roughly for about a year. And before that, I was a kid that had nothing going on. I worked at fast food. I delivered auto parts. I worked at Montgomery Ward's in the shop, busting tires. I just, I was kind of one of those guys who, in the old days, they called it, I bought a job. My wife and I, we the guy we were working for, I heard him complain every day, I ought to sell, I ought to sell, I ought to sell. And finally I looked at him and I said, well, what do you want for it? And he says, well, I'll take $50,000 and you take over the payments on the truck. And I went back to my wife at the time and I said, this is what he wants. And yeah, she says, well, see if he'll take 25,000 down and 25,000 of payments take over. And he took it. And that was the beginning of my story. Back in the RPS days, it was rough. It was really, really, really rough. Any of the old timers absolutely know what RPS was like. Threatened with your contract every day and dictated what vehicles you could have. We've come a long, long, long way since the old RPS days. I think my first expansion was 18 months in. And with that first expansion and what I had originally bought, just that itself is like 16 trucks today. So back in 99, when it was 2 trucks. So I'll give you an idea of the kind of growth. So over the last 25 years, I've we'll say expanded and retracted, currently in 3 different stations, running over 40 trucks a day. I've seen the good times, the bad times, the ups, the downs, the heavy freight, the light freight. Kind of this current cycle we're in is weird because first time I ever saw the freight go down in my career. Yeah, so that was really different. But yeah, that's kind of my beginning and we'll work through to where we're at.
So you started as a driver, really as your first kind of professional job outside of doing retail and smaller jobs like that. You started as a driver, had an opportunity to buy a route and actually become a contractor for RPS. And for our listeners or watchers who don't know, RPS was the predecessor to what we would know today as FedEx Ground contracting, or the FedEx Ground service provider model. I can't remember the exact year that RPS went away and it was all FedEx Ground. What year was that?
That was kind of the transition, 99 to 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the time, the territory that you were in charge of at that time was 2 trucks. Same territory today is more like 16 trucks. And that illustrates just the growth, not horizontally, expanding the borders of where you're delivering packages. You're talking about the same area growing from needing 2 trucks to 16 trucks over the course of 25 years. That's a lot of growth. It's funny, Jason, I hear a lot of people talk very fondly of the RPS days, or at least I used to. I used to hear people say like, oh man, we got paid so much, X per package, and there was, no rules. We could do things pretty much however we wanted. It doesn't sound like that's your perspective on the old RPS days, though. You made it sound like it was maybe even more challenging than what you're doing today, or how was it different?
There was more. I guess you could say there was more give and take back in the RPS days. Really, we were threatened with our contract on a daily basis. We joked around about the rule of the day, made up rules by the data entry clerk because they didn't have senior managers. Managing directors were always on everybody's butt. So you had the rule of the day committee and things like that. But at the same time, it was a lot of hot air. Nobody got their contracts taken away. I mean, there were a couple, and it was pretty egregious stuff when they did. But the stress, that kind of stress every day of being treated that way. In Montana, with the area that we dealt with being extremely rural, and back then it was a contractor sort, and you'd start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and RPS interpreted DOT laws the way that they wanted to. So you'd have till 6 o'clock at night to get everything delivered and get back, and it was tough in this area. It was super, super, super tough. And if you can imagine covering 400 miles in a truck, and we delivered to the brokers up in Sweetgrass. It's the Canadian border, and you'd have to scurry up there and deliver 300 packages, pick up 400 packages, and then you had all this rural stuff in between, before and after. And yeah, it was really, really, really tough. But basically, I said this, and I've said it to all the senior managers since. We lied, cheated, and stole our way through RPS. It was the old boys, it was the Wild West. Yeah. And I've told many drivers since then, I catch you doing the stuff we did back then, I'll fire you on the spot.
The standards have raised. What attracted you to that kind of business? I mean, it was your first real job. Maybe that's not being totally respectful of, retail stores. I've worked, in a grocery store before, but I mean, really, this was your first, kind of professional step, it seems, in your career. You drove for a while, and you obviously liked it because you explored wanting to buy the route, even though it was the Wild West and it was super, super tough. What attracted you to the business?
Truthfully, I'll call it my DNA. But driving was always in my blood. I absolutely loved to drive. I drove so much that I had so many tickets, I didn't think I would ever be able to have the driving job. From the 16 to 18, I don't know, I joined the military. I told them I had a lot of tickets. And they said, not a problem. And recruiter calls me up and he says, you have a lot of tickets. And I said, I told you that. And he says, no, you have a lot of tickets. He says, I went to lunch and started the teletype, and it's still typing after I got back from lunch. I said, well, yeah, I told you I had a lot of tickets. So for me, I just never thought I would be able to have a driving job because of my past. And boy, when the opportunity was out there, I was stoked for it. So, yeah.
So tell us about how the business evolved and your growth along the way. So you bought in $25,000 down, $25,000 carried by the seller. Plus you took over, one or two truck lease payments. How did you grow from there? I mean, was it just a kind of a linear, each year there was a little bit more volume and you had to add more drivers and trucks over time, or did you aggressively try to expand the borders of your business through the years? Walk us through your growth.
It actually, of course, the combination of both. I mean, for 20 plus years, FedEx continued to grow in volume. So we had that growth. But then I also, starting in my Great Falls facility, you could call it aggressive. I was always the guy that, hey, you need something done. Yeah, here, give it to me. I'll go do it. And back in the day, in those early years, they used cartage agents, they used the postal service, they did alternate day service and all those things. And I was the guy who would kind of come in and say, hey, why are you paying the cartage agents? I'll go deliver that. Those days it was tough because the IC model, you didn't get paid for every truck that was out on the road, and your package pays and your stop pays. They weren't like today's pay. And I mean, I made some sacrifices and I looked at the big picture, the greater good of the FedEx, how we grow FedEx, how my partner to FedEx. And basically through the dedication of me and my team, FedEx would award contracts. I did buy a couple contracts over the years, but for the most part, the hard work of our team, FedEx would award us work area contracts. So that was really it. A combination of just the organic growth of FedEx itself and just our hard work with expanding territory.
I don't think that we'll get into really the nitty gritty of how the contracts work, but you had mentioned something that stood out to me, which was that the contracts paid completely differently back then. You didn't get paid necessarily for every truck that you had on the road. Back then it was, you'd have a PSA, primary service area, and a supplemental. Do you think that the contracts today in general are more favorable than they were back then?
In a lot of ways, yes. There were some things when we converted over from from IC to ISP. It was a couple months after we did that. They had made some change in the IC model, which actually would have benefited me better in the IC model. But going from the IC model I had to the ISP model, we made more money. Really, honestly, what ISP gave us was more flexibility to run our business with routing. Before, you really were kind of ruled on how you ran a route. You were kind of ruled on how many trucks you could use and things like that. So today, the flexibility of running routes the way you want, knowing what's going to work more efficient. They brought out DRO and all that for help, but DRO is limited to knowing customers and times that businesses are open and closed and things like that, traffic patterns, one-ways and highways and things like that. So really going from IC model to the ISP model, you did inherently become more efficient, and with efficiency comes more money.
Now, I want to define some of these acronyms that you're using. I think most of the people listening to the show or watching the show are existing FedEx contractors, and they'll probably know what you're talking about. But we also get a lot of people who are interested in the business, and they're conducting research and trying to learn. So FedEx Ground used to operate under something called the independent contractor model, IC. Yep. And I'll explain my understanding. Jason, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because you're definitely the expert on this call. But the way that my understanding as to how it worked back then under the IC model was that you would get assigned a primary service area, or PSA, and that was basically a route. FedEx would say, look, there's this specific route, and here's all the stops and pickups, and here's what we need delivered. You should be able to do it with one truck. If you can't, you can add a second truck, which we would call a supplemental truck. But there's not much more added compensation to cover the cost of that. So ideally, you'll run it with one truck if you can. But it was really FedEx defining the route and what gets delivered and the path that you take. At some point, really area by area, they switched away from that and moved over to the ISP model, which stands for Independent Service Provider. And the change there was, instead of having PSAs, you would have a CSA, which is a contracted service area. So instead of all these fragmented individual routes that FedEx defined, they would give you one larger consolidated area, your contracted service area. But they would basically say, look, we're not going to tell you how many trucks or where those trucks need to be. It's up to you. Get the packages delivered. You have to do it safely. You have to do it without customer complaints. You can't miss deliveries or pickups. But within those parameters, you can put as many or as few trucks as you want and optimize the contracted service area however you want. Did I get that right? And is that speaking to the flexibility that you were talking about?
Yeah, you got it right. I mean, we could get into the specifics of the contracts and the pay models and things like that. But yeah, you hit it. The PSA, the primary service area, you got van availability, and that was paid for one van. And really, in our experience in the old PSA, the old IC world, right before we switched to ISP, I had 7 contracted vans, so your PSAs, 7 PSAs, and it took us 17 vehicles to run that. And they lumped you into in mileage category. And for me to make any money, I'll give you an example. Like the main city that we serve, where our station is Great Falls, Montana. And I covered 3/4 of the city. And that took like 5 vans. Well, to make any money, I had 5 vans doing one PSA, because all of my rural routes, we made those PSAs. And that's where I got my core zone pay, your van availability, core zone. That was a lump dollar sum based off of the zip code. And one zip code might be worth 100, another zip code might be worth 50. Then they averaged it out stops, and so you didn't get $150. You got an average based upon how many stops in each zip code. Long formula. So the only way you could make money when you were big like that was you kind of had to lie, cheat, and steal again. And there were a lot of and then they based new PSAs for split routes off of what are other contractors doing. And in that 50 and below, boy, was I a hated contractor, because here I am running, 500 stops, 600 stops in a 0 to 50. And they're saying, well, this contractor's doing it. Why can't you? Well, that's because we were cheating or we were doing what we had to do. And so it wasn't based upon, these things weren't based upon what was needed. It was based upon some averages that really didn't fit anything. And yeah.
Are you familiar with the capacity-based service agreement that's being tested out in certain FedEx Ground markets? Have you heard of that?
I've heard about it, but I haven't really looked into it at all.
Okay. Tell us about some challenges. What are some challenging times that you've experienced over the course of your career?
Well, definitely COVID.
Yeah, tell us more.
COVID was, oh boy, that was horrible. Man, we saw a volume influx like we'd never seen before. And the truth is, and I know everybody that's been around knew it, the big contractors. I was one of the big contractors. And volume increases like you'd never seen before. And then all the government rules on, you have to do this for your employee and do that for your employees. And here we are in a market that's going through the roof and no way to find employees. People said, heck, I can sit at home. Why would I go to work? And then you had the FMLA with paid FMLA, with the COVID FMLA. And, we had an employee that took the COVID FMLA, then took FMLA after it. And then, so you're paying them, and then you're paying them. And then when he got done with FMLA, he filed for unemployment. And we were like, whoa, time out. You got to come back to work. We didn't let you go. But there was a lot of things like that where you were just struggling all the time to find drivers, and they could sit at home and make money. So why would I go to work? You had your challenges with with all your business customers, with new rules on where I want my stuff, and wearing masks. Boy, drivers hated wearing masks. You're doing a laboring job, and now you got to put this thing on your face, and you're trying to breathe through that. Yeah, that was definitely, that's the worst thing I've ever, in my career. Let's take the RPS stuff. That was cake. COVID sucked, just to put it bluntly. It sucked. And we didn't make it out unscathed. I ended up having to sell one operation, ended up having to downsize an operation, and ended up with an operation that they, at the end of the contract, they awarded to somebody else. So it was a tough time, but we've come out of it. We learned a lot, and we'll keep on plugging away.
You say that you learned a lot. Is there anything that you could define? I mean, what are some specific lessons that you learned going through that experience?
You got to overstaff, whether you like it or not. Just having a real conversation with employees about expectations and things like that. And that in today's environment is even tough, because employees don't want to work They don't want to work 5 days. They don't want to work 6 days. Employees in today's market value their time more than they value money, which, I mean, that's a really weird concept for us, because we've all, you work really hard, you make your money, and then you can take a vacation. And in today's society, it's really more, they do value that time more than they value making the money. They would rather have 3-4 days a week off. And so changing everything, it has forced a mindset change as an employer on what you do. But the balance of money versus time, it's not like you get to pay them a day less. So you gotta find that balance on money and time that they get. But they really don't value the money as much as they do value their time. And that was one of the big learning lessons coming out of this. They got all that time that they never had before, and now they want it. And give it to them, or you lose them.
So what does that look like in practice? I mean, do you have employees, instead of working, when you envision a full-time employee, they're probably working 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day. That's how I grew up thinking that's full-time work. Do you have a lot of drivers now who are working 3 or 4 days a week or doing 6-hour shifts? What does that actually look like?
They really all kind of want a 6-hour shift now, and they all kind of really think that a full-time job now is 30 hours. And it took me a long time to figure out what the heck was going on. Why was there this shift thinking that 30 hours was full-time? And it dawned on me one day, and I was like, whoa, this actually goes back to the Barack Obama administration, when they were changing full-time benefits. They weren't changing the definition of what a full-time job was. They were changing the definition of what full-time benefits were. And this younger generation takes that as full-time benefits and full-time job are the same thing. And that it took me 5-6 years to figure out that's where the mindset come from. The Barack Obama administration had changed full-time benefits to 30 hours from 36. And so now the new generation thinks that's a full-time job, 30 hours. You have the guys that go out and then they work 6-hour days every day. And then when they have one full day, they're like, well, I've done my work, I'm coming home, or I put my hours in, I'm coming home. And you're like, oh, no, you got to finish the route. And they're like, no, I've put my time in. So it's, those are those challenges. So now you're trying to figure out how to be efficient in FedEx's world and cater to what the younger generation is wanting as far as time. So there's real challenges and balances in those too. I don't think anybody has the perfect answer yet, but we're all working on it.
How did the COVID pandemic and the challenges that you experienced compare to the 2008-9 recession?
I think I was kind of isolated from 2008, 2009. It didn't really, we were to continue 2008, 2009, we were still on that steady growth. It wasn't crazy growth or anything like that. It was still steady. The pay model worked. So everything, our fuel supplement took care of our fuel prices and things like that. So really the model that FedEx had, it kind of cushioned it for us. And it was pretty seamless. 2008, 2009, COVID was not. That was crazy. And I'd only ever seen one other time in the whole time that was crazy like that. And that was a very short span. And that was when UPS went on strike. And that was an influx of freight like no other. But it was a short-lived thing. And, FedEx is managers and everything else were out delivering packages alongside us too. So, but I don't think, there's the threat of UPS going on strike right now, and I don't think anybody's ready for that.
Let's talk more about that. You became a driver in September of 98. I think you had said September of 98.
Contractor.
You became a contractor in September of 98. Okay. So were you a driver during the 1997 UPS strike?
Got in right on the rear end of it.
Okay. So you were feeling the effects of it. I mean, they were in it.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like? I think a lot of FedEx contractors today have only been in the business for a handful of years. They have no idea what it was like. I talked to people about those days in 1997 when the UPS Teamsters, they went on strike, and I've had people use words like it was pandemonium. What was it actually like? You were showing up to work every day. What were you experiencing?
Oh, there's really no real words. Here in Great Falls, before the strike, I mean, we were operating, and then after the strike, 4 vehicles to cover. We covered a huge amount of the state with 4 vans, and I mean, we went from 400 packages a day to trailer fulls, and it was like, what do we do with this stuff? There's just, it was nuts. It was just nuts. When the strike was over, we were like, oh, thank God. We didn't like it. There was no sustainable way to do it long term either. So, nuts, pandemonium. Any exasperating word you can use, it was. And I got to be honest, I hope they don't go on strike now. We can't handle it. FedEx has their rules in place where they're saying we have told customers it's too late to sign on. If FedEx goes on, or if UPS goes on a strike, there is no good for us. We are kind of in a position of a damned if we do, damned if we don't. The customers are going to look at us if we don't take their freight and say, you failed us when we needed you. Or if we do take the customers, you failed us because you didn't get our freight delivered. So we can only hope that they come to an agreement. We are not ready. Nobody is ready anywhere. So we'll just hope that doesn't happen, because even if FedEx has put the restrictions in there, saying we're just not going to take you. You had your moment to sign up. We failed. We failed the customer, and that's what they're going to see. So we can just hope it doesn't happen.
Is there nothing you can do to get ready? Or, I mean, is there anything, no matter, even if it's minor, even if it doesn't move the needle much, is there anything that you're doing right now to prepare for the chance of a UPS strike?
Yeah, 12 days. No. I mean, really, the clock is ticking. FedEx sent a message out, I guess it's 2 weeks ago. There's no way possible that, especially with an area that I cover, the size of area I cover, I mean, it would over double our freight overnight. There is no way. That you can't hire that many people, train that many people in that amount of time. And, the letter that, most contractors, if they go to my ground biz, the letter basically said you have a contract to provide service. Be safe, be this, be that. Last paragraph, you have a contract. So it's like, you're going to go service it, and you're going to do it, and you're going to do it right. And I can't add 10 people in one station in 2 weeks.
What about the alternative vehicle program as a temporary fix for a big volume influx? Is that something that would be viable? I mean, could you post ads saying, hey, do you own a minivan and you need to make some extra cash? Come deliver FedEx packages during the UPS strike. Would that be viable?
There is a possibility of that. you do also run into, okay, so I've got a driver. I mean, exploring options. I have lots of extra scanners. I was one of those guys that made sure I had extra scanners. If they don't have scanners, then they're going to have to use a hand sheet. And that's an efficiency thing. It's doable. And, you tell a driver today that they're going to a hand sheet, and they tell you, I'm going home. But an AVP driver, in essence, doesn't know the difference between the scanner and a hand sheet. So if they got a hand sheet, well, I got to write these numbers down. But when we're talking about efficiencies, if I'm doing in today's market a stop every 2 minutes 45 seconds to 3 minutes and 10 seconds, gosh, it might take that long to write down a tracking number. So, and in the AVP world, I have my own AVP vehicles. I had bought a whole bunch of vehicles for AVP during COVID to try to get through COVID. So we have our vehicles. Market wise, it's still tough getting people into a vehicle, even in the AVP, and that's a market thing. That's not a FedEx thing. The FedEx thing, it's not hard to get an AVP driver approved. Just market, what is it? Compensation. Everybody wants a lot more money than you're really willing to give out.
Jason, let's talk about some of the things that you're doing today. So give us a breakdown of your business. You had mentioned that you're in 3 stations today. It sounds like your business, your entire enterprise was actually larger before COVID and that you've downsized somewhat since then, but you're about, I think you'd said 40 trucks out of 3 stations. You're active in both pickup and delivery and line haul. How do the trucks break down? And do you have dedicated runs on the line haul side, or are you doing all wild board stuff?
Yeah, all of my tractors are dedicated. That's again, and that's not even anything that I've been talking about in this whole thing. Is my line haul operation. The line haul is its own unique. It is its own unique thing, and line haul drivers again, they're very fickle, and they will jump fence for a penny. I'm going to go work for this guy. He's offering me a penny more than what you're offering. So you're always in that flux of just trying to figure out what everybody's paying just so you can keep your drivers. And, the industries have really, really, really changed in that matter. People jump ship quick. And so you've always got to have your fingers on the pulse of what everybody is paying and keeping up with that. And line haul drivers tend to be more transient too. They'll work. Hey, I'm going to work in Montana for 4 or 5 months, and now I'm going to go down south and work. A lot of these truck drivers don't like to work in the cold weather, so you're always hiring just to make sure you don't. That you can service your runs and you don't fail. That said, FedEx has come to the realization that the markets for drivers is much harder now. And it used to be, geez, you failed a few runs and you lost your line haul contract on that run. It's a lot more forgiving now. Now you have a percentage number that, how many runs have you declined, once your percentage gets down. Then you have 45 days to make a correction where, boy, back in the day, you failed 5 runs you failed a week. That you're done. That run's gone. You lose that run. And they've relaxed that a lot. But we never want to lose runs. That's revenue. But you do now have the buffer just in case.
So we've been talking about personnel and recruiting. How do you recruit? Are you posting ads on Indeed? Do you have a recruiting agency that you like to use? I think a lot of people tuning into our show, they want to know, hey, some of these long contractors who have been around for a while, they really know their stuff. in practice, what are they actually doing to execute on, recruiting, trucks, technology, operations? I guess just starting at recruiting, how do you recruit?
Well, for the longest time, if I go from the beginning to now, way back in the day, we'd use the local newspaper, and then as Facebook became more popular, then we'd use Facebook, and then Craigslist came around, used Craigslist, and now Indeed. But we actually just signed on with the company that does our safety training and our vetter cameras, and that's Impact Solutions. So Impact Solutions has a recruiting arm that they place the ads throughout all these different advertising agencies and everything else, and then they do the onboarding and things like that. You can kind of pick what you want them to do. There's prices, of course, for everything, and they will do it all the way up to the point of when the driver's 100% approved. The first time you see the drivers when they come in to do their obstacle course and observed driving. Now, I don't think that's the smartest thing in the world. We've told them, well, before they're hired, I would really like to do a live interview with this person, but let's go ahead and get them all the way through the approval process to know if they're even going to make it. And then we'll interview them and we'll make a decision at that point. So that's brand new. We actually just signed that contract last week. And we're going to see how that works. For us, before that, recruiting basically, I won't say it was a full-time job, but it did take a lot of time in your day. And you would set up interviews, and it seems, the reality is that interviews in the evening are really what people want. So you would set up interviews and you'd have 4 or 5 interviews for the evening and nobody'd show up. So we did that for years and years and years. And I looked at, all the time and effort that was put into that with very little positive effect. So we finally decided that we're gonna give this a shot with Impact and see how that works. Hopefully it's good. And the nice thing about it is, like I say, everything with it has a bit of a cost. And if I get a station that's up to level at a level I'd like it at, then I can say, okay, turn that station off. You can dial it up, and every month you can change. Okay, I want it here, I want it there. I'm getting a little tight in this station. Turn this station back on. So and the cost is based off of your need every month, and I'm hoping that's the magic bullet for getting people onboarded in a truck. Hey, talk to me next month. We'll see how it went.
Are you going to go to? Are you going to either of the big live events coming up?
I had agreed to go, and I have another venture that it's looking like that's when my grand opening. But hey, I'm in the transportation industry, so why not buy a bar?
You bought a bar, right on.
Bought a bar. I mean, I'm joking, but this industry drives you to drink, so why not own the beer? Yeah. So yeah, no, it coincides with my grand opening in Great Falls. The Montana State Fair is at that time, and I really need to be here with a grand opening of a bar at that time. So unfortunately, no, I'm not going to be going down to Orlando.
So we talked about recruiting. You're trying out a new company, Impact Solutions, and it sounds like they're involved with training. And then I think you had also mentioned the Vetter systems too. They administer the Vetter systems for you.
Okay, so they don't. Trying to think of who. I don't. I've got so many things rolling. I can't tell you exactly which Vetter system I'm using, but they are one of those that the safety training and everything, that whole big package actually ties together with my Vetter system. So the safety system talks to the Vetter system. And so it just makes it one nice little toolbox that I get to deal with. And I don't have to have all these other different systems that I'm looking at. I just go into one website and everything's there.
And what about route optimization? Are you using any third-party tools for that, or is it all the FedEx provided DRO and WAP systems?
So primarily we do use FedEx's DRO system with Route Smart. I'm not going to bash any other companies or anything like that. We did use another company, and the Vetter system that we had before we switched over, we loved it. That tool was like a great tool, and the company that I had switched to at that time, their Vetter system just wasn't up to par. And was it Package Route? I believe it is what we started using for drivers that didn't know their routes. I guess that's one of the things that I've had a hard time adjusting to is FedEx, getting people in the truck and out on the road faster. They want to use these systems that tell drivers where to go. I'm not a huge proponent of it. It's great. I don't how to go down that road. I don't think it's the best option to send a brand new driver out on a route that they don't know. I really still subscribe to the old way of you really need to sit down with a really good driver, put a trainee in with them, and train them on that route without a scanner or an iPad or whatever telling them where to go. They miss so much. There's a lot of roads. They shouldn't go down that road. We live in Montana, which there's a ton of rural, and they go down roads that they shouldn't go down. It increased cost of maintenance and things like that. So I still subscribe to the idea of thoroughly training a new guy on a route. Now, the assistant tools, I believe, are really good for a seasoned driver that you can throw out on another route in emergency. You got a driver that called in sick, and you've got a seasoned driver that's a really proficient driver, and you can say, hey, I need you to go do this route today. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they can follow the scanner. And because they're not always eyes down. And that's what I call it, is eyes down, staring at a scanner, never seeing the road. A seasoned driver is going to be eyes up, looking at the road and occasionally peeking down and going, okay, that's my key mark where I need to turn. And they actually are, they see the roads, where new drivers, they got blinders on. And they never see their surroundings. They could go to an address every single day, and you ask them how to get there, and they wouldn't know without that map. They wouldn't know how to get there. So I think they're great tools. I just don't think they're great for new drivers. I really believe you need to sit down and really train a new driver right.
What about a fuel card? Do you have a fuel card that you like?
Well, I mean, there's a local co-op in Great Falls that we use for most of our fuel, and then my bank has a fuel card, so we use our local bank for our fuel card. We've looked at WAX, and we've looked at all the big card providers and things like that. And at this point, we just haven't pulled the trigger. It's not I don't trust them or anything like that. It's just what we're doing now works for us. And yeah, like I know a lot of the big fuel card companies, they want the payment every week. And our fuel card, the fuel card through our bank, it's once a month. And over the years, we've really found that financially having the flexibility, a month-long flexibility that gives you can budget your money a lot easier than if you've got to pay a fuel bill every week. That can be tough because some weeks you don't make as much money, and you did more miles, you've used more fuel, but you didn't have as many stops. It's so it's kind of harder to balance it out if you're paying every week.
Are there any other pieces of technology that you're using today that you weren't using a few years ago that you feel like have made a positive impact on your business?
Oh, I have to say no. We talk about like the Vetter systems and things like that. Because I was in line haul, they introduced a Vetter in line haul a long, long, long time ago. So I knew eventually the Vetter would come to the P&D world. So when they introduced Vetter for line haul, I put Vetter in all my P&D vehicles. So I was a long, long time subscriber to Vetter before it was a required thing. We had a lot of years to see how it worked, and we were way ahead of everybody on Vetter. And it was, FedEx used me to talk to contractors on all the uses of Vetter, because really we didn't necessarily use Vetter as a crash tool. We used Vetter for lots of different things. We used Vetter, customers complaining about our drivers speeding down the road. Well, we had Vetter. We could prove that we weren't. Because Vetter was GPS based, being able to track packages down. We were so far ahead of everybody on all of that none of this stuff is, because I've always been ahead on technology, nothing that's come around is anything that's new to me. And in some ways, having a conversation about it, it's kind of tough because I've been doing it for so long that there's nothing new.
What about preventative maintenance tracking, any total cost of ownership analysis type tools for your fleet? I've heard lots of people say, there's really 4 pillars to the business, which is, recruiting, trucks, technology, and then efficient operations. And on the truck side, what system do you have in place for knowing when the oil needs to get changed, or brake pads, or, inspections? Not related to DOT, but just inspections to make sure that your trucks are running tip top. Do you have a piece of software that you use, or do you have someone in charge of that for you?
Well, again, this is where I'm a little bit unique. I have my own repair shop. So it's a shop open to the public, services my vehicles. I have an employee at the shop that he's dedicated to tracking mileages on vehicles, talking to the BCs in the company, just trying to keep ahead of little issues being big issues. So I guess I would encourage anybody who gets into this business, buy a shop, have your own repair crew, and dedicated person to being the guy who talks to the drivers, being a guy who talks to your VCs about the minor issues. Minor issues become very big issues very fast if you don't attack them. A 30-minute repair turns into a 2-week repair really fast. So if you can, get your own shop, get your own crew. Because if you're having to go to someone else, you're a slave to that shop. Don't be a slave to that shop if you can afford to. Go big or go home, Get as big as you can. Don't stay small. That's terrible. Don't do it.
Jason, I think this is the last thing. Where do you go from here? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I've been doing it for 25 years. I see FedEx trending back in a more favorable, for contractors with the changes that are being made with One FedEx. So I'm looking forward to the future with the growth. We're going to see some growth again. We're going to see some settlement enhancements again. I think metals was a great tool. I can't wait to see it on my dashboard, because I am a guy who likes to do a daily tracking without having to talk to FedEx. I like my tools at my fingertips if I want to get up at 3:00 in the morning. So where do I go from here is just positive. FedEx is making some very positive changes in the model in how they're doing business. I'm excited about that. Yeah, we're going to go big, go bigger again. Yeah, we'll get back up over 100 trucks on the road every day.
What was your peak? You had mentioned you're around 40 today, but you were larger at one point. What was the largest your business has ever been in terms of trucks on the road?
Right around 120.
120. Wow.
Yeah, it fluctuated day to day, but yeah, right around 120.
Jason, is there anything else you want to talk about while we're here?
Gosh, I don't know. You got anything for me surprising that I don't know about?
No, I really don't. I mean, the big topics of today, One FedEx and, contractors in Alaska and Hawaii lost their contracts. They, basically ended FedEx contracting in those states. And the same thing just happened in Canada. So FedEx Ground contracting, at least to my understanding, is no longer a thing in Canada. They're flipping it over to Express. But the opposite seems to be happening in the lower 48 states. Every week that goes by, I just saw, there was at least, I think there's 2 or 3 stations in Indiana that got their notice they're going to be closing down and flipping over to Ground. And so, in the lower 48 states, it seems to be going in the favor of contractors, that they're going to be reducing the number of corporate-owned express vehicles and diverting more and more of those packages into the Ground network. The UPS strike is another topic, of today, but we spoke about that. I think that's really, those are really the hot topics of today. And we checked all the boxes that I wanted to. So, okay.
A clarification on the One FedEx for Canada. So in Canada, the P&D door-to-door operation is going to Express. The line haul operation is staying contractor driven. So that piece of FedEx Ground is sticking around the contractor line haul operation.
Got it. Okay. So there's still the over-the-road truck line haul aspect of that.
Yep.
Jason, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And best of luck with everything the rest of the year. Best of luck opening your bar. Hope you have fun with it. Routing for Success is brought to you by AP Equipment Financing. In today's competitive market, it is essential to acquire the right trucks at a fair price and finance them in a way that makes sense for your business. Leveraging their extensive network of truck and van suppliers, the experts at AP Equipment Financing will help you locate the best deals on step vans, cutaways, panel vans, and more. Deliver them straight to your facility and finance them with low monthly installment options. Click the link in the description or visit apfinancing.com for more information. Routing for Success is an independent production of AP Equipment Financing and is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by FedEx Corporation, FedEx Ground, Amazon, or any other logistics company discussed herein. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Routing for Success.